Good morning YouTube, and welcome back to my workshop. This is a follow-on video from the one in which I made a batch of 9 of these little small chop-in serving boards, and that was an experiment to see whether I could make them in a reasonable amount of time. If you haven't seen that vid, I'll put a link below, so watch that one first. In this video, what I want to do is embellish a little bit on the design, and the idea that I've got is using exactly the same shape. What I want to do is take multiple species and then cut the handle out of one and glue it back into another. So I've got contrasting handles on each one of the boards. And again, I want to time that to see how long that's going to take and whether it'll allow me to increase the price enough to make the extra time that that's going to require worthwhile. I've prepared all of my timber in exactly the same way that I did for the previous batch. Excuse me. So that timing's going to stay the same. I've got lots of different species. I've got some walnuts, some Iroko, and some ash, and there's even a piece of walnut here with a strip of maple in the middle. Now, the extra steps I've had to take so far are, in this batch, I've had to clean up the end because I needed to strike dead center and get all of the boards exactly the same width. And I wanted to strike dead center on every board so that I could get that grain. Hopefully you can see that on this one. So there's 4 pieces, and I wanted that center join where that grain's book matched to be right in the center of the handle and the board. So in order to achieve that, I made myself up a little center finder, a bit of leftover ply, a couple of nails, and pencil in the middle so that I could mark the middle of the board on each one of them. And then I took a little L shape of leftover MDF with the center marked, cut to the width that I want the board to be, each of the boards to be, and then marked one edge, ran them all down on the table saw, and then flip them over and cut them to the exact width I want. So I've now got all of these pieces at exactly the same width. So I've got a piece of leftover ply here that I've cut to the exact size that the pieces are going to be before I route the template shape. And this is the template that I used in the previous video that I'm going to use again for this. So I'm going to line this up dead center on my piece of ply and then draw around it so I can work out exactly where I want the handle cut out to be. And I'm thinking that the inverse of this, which brings me to there, would give me that nice V shape. If I square that line across, take a mark there and there, and then go from that point to that point, then that's what I'm going to end up with as a different coloured handle. And I think that's going to look quite smart. So I'm going to use a piece of MDF as the base for the jig, or the sliding carriage if you like, and I'm going to screw this mitre bar to the bottom of the board. To make sure I cut the angle correctly on the bandsaw, I'm going to use my sliding bevel to copy the angle that I've just drawn on my test piece. Then I can place my test piece where I want it to be, lined up perfectly with the blade, and then use my sliding bevel to get my angle right. So I'm going to draw around the test piece. And then I can cut some strips of MDF just for this to sit in, so that I can push through for one flip it over, push through for the other. So the last thing is the stop point. So what I need now is a stop, and I was hoping that there would still be a bit of the table showing so I could pop a clamp there, but there's not. So I'm going to cut a piece of this board out back to about there, which will reveal that little end corner of the table, and then I can clamp a piece of waste wood or just the clamp itself there, which will act as a stop to guarantee I get them all to exactly the same size. So I'm just a hair off. I want to come down maybe a millimetre more just to get that last wee bit out. So I'll adjust my stop, just a fracco. So the last thing I want to do is to cut some 1mm strips of, I'm going to go with maple, which I think is going to do them all bar one. And I'm using my thin Rip Jig that I made. I'll put a link to the video below, so that I can just adjust the fence each time and whip off 3 or 4 of these. So that's from that one, that's from that one. I swap them over. I take 2 of my little infill pieces, drop them in, slide my false handle in, well, I'm going to call that a successful test, which means I can start cutting all the pieces to length and then cutting the handles out on the bandsaw. Which brings me to the glue up. Now, I think the most complicated bit out of this so far is going to be choosing which cutout to put in which V. So instead of worrying about it, I'm just going to go through the pile as it is, I think, unless one looks particularly bad. But I will have plenty of time to think about it, because I don't have enough clamps to do them all in one hit. And once again, I've forgotten to put my glue mat down. I've simplified the routing down to a single clamp, as you can see. The match fit dovetail clamps worked a treat, apart from the clamp handles getting in the way of the router body. So by utilising the Craig clamp track built into the top of the bench, I've only got one obstacle to navigate around, so routing the templates is now greatly simplified. The only issue now being that I need to be extremely careful not to allow the router to tip, so I'm focusing on keeping one of the router body pillars on top of the workpiece at all times. The 3 depth stops on the turret on this router are 6mm apart. I'm using a 6mm bit, so I want a max depth of 3mm for each pass. So I've just got a 3mm setup block that I'm using to space in between each one so that I don't overload the bit. Putting the roundovers on, sanding, damping and applying the finish is exactly the same process as the first batch, so I won't bother to video that in this one. Instead, we'll skip right to the end. And here they are, the finished article. I am so chuffed with them. They've come out looking absolutely beautiful. I haven't bothered to try and make any particular design. I just kind of went a bit mix and match with them. I quite like this one with the 2 little shoulder bits, but we'll have to see when they get on the stand what people think of them. But all in all, I'm just so delighted with the way they've come out and the difference it's made if you put them side by side with the original beach boards. Not that I've got anything against beach, I really like beach, but that's in a different league. So from a price perspective, these are going to command a lot more money, possibly toward twice what this would command. So I was thinking I might get 1750 for that, and that's going to be 25-30 quid easily, I think. So totally worth it. And let's talk about the amount of time, the extra time it took to make that over that. This is quite mind-blowing as well. It worked out to an extra 7 minutes per board. That's it. 7 minutes more to make that instead of that. And all down to batching it, because you've got your machine all set to do that particular function, so you can run through piece after piece after piece after piece, and as you're doing it you'll become more efficient with each process that you're going through. So totally worth it. Really pleased with it. So let's deal with the elephant in the room. Why didn't I use the CNC? The one reason I didn't want to use the CNC was I wanted to see how long it would take me by hand, and I thought that would be of interest to you as well if you don't own a CNC. The only bit that the CNC is going to replace is the actual routing out of the shape, and that ended up taking me 7 minutes. So I'm now wondering whether it's actually going to be worth running the same thing through the CNC just to save that 7 minute block of time. So I've still got preparation time exactly the same with each piece, but I'm then going to have the extra time of clamping it down in the CNC, setting the CNC going, taking it out of the CNC and then dealing with the tab removal or the waste removal thereafter. So I'm not sure that I'm actually going to save more than 2 or 3 minutes per board. If I'm going to make a run of 100 of them, then arguably worthwhile running them on the CNC, but I don't think I'll bother for now because I think I've got enough to be going on with. So to answer the question, is it worth making small chopping boards? I think the answer's got to be a yes. Anyway, thanks so much indeed for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you've got any thoughts, suggestions, comments, agreements or disagreements, please leave them in the comment section below. If you really liked the video, give us a thumbs up. If you loved it, consider subscribing. And if you think it was mind-blowingly stunning, then why not hop over to my Patreon page and have a look at what I've got to offer there. Thanks very much indeed, and see you next time. Ta-ra.